Have you ever witnessed a moment so powerful, so unexpected, that it left an entire room speechless? That's exactly what happened when a fiery young debater thought she could take on Barron Trump, only to discover she was up against a force far greater than she ever imagined. Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't want to miss. The debate hall was alive with energy, a grand auditorium filled with the brightest young minds from across America. The air buzzed with anticipation as students, professors, and guests settled into their seats. The stage, illuminated by warm golden lights, stood as a platform for ideas, arguments, and, tonight, a clash of generations. At the center of it all was Madison Clarke, a rising star in the world of student debates. With her signature purple-streaked hair and a sharp, confident stride, she exuded the kind of energy that demanded attention. Her tailored blazer bore a pin that read, "The future is female," and her eyes sparkled with determination as she approached the podium. The audience hushed as Madison adjusted the microphone, her smirk hinting at the bold statements to come. She scanned the room, her gaze lingering on the older professors and guests seated in the front rows. Among them sat a tall, composed young man in a crisp navy suit, Barron Trump. He sat quietly, his hands folded, his expression calm and unreadable. "Fellow students," Madison began, her voice clear and commanding, "we are here to discuss progress. But let's be honest. There's an elephant in the room that we need to address: the suffocating grip of outdated generations on our nation's future." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some students shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward, intrigued by her bold opening. Madison continued, her voice growing stronger. "Look around you. While we struggle with modern challenges, people over 50 still control our destiny. These traditionalists cling to their obsolete values, their precious faith, their so-called patriotism, their rigid family structures." Scattered applause broke out, encouraging her to push further. Madison's confidence grew as she gestured toward the older guests in the room. "These people," she said, her tone dripping with disdain, "these boomers who can barely use a smartphone, somehow still decide our future. They've had their time. It's time to admit that their generation is holding us back from true progress." In the third row, Barron Trump remained still, his expression unchanged. His sharp blue eyes observed Madison with quiet intensity, as if he were studying her every word. Around him, students nodded in agreement, some even whispering their approval of Madison's fiery rhetoric. "What we need," Madison declared, her voice rising with conviction, "is an age limit on political participation. Why should someone who won't live to see the consequences of their choices have any say in our future?" The crowd erupted in applause. Many students stood cheering her on. Madison's smirk widened as she fed off the energy in the room. These people, with their obsession with God and guns, their Make America Great Again nostalgia, she made air quotes with her fingers, they're dinosaurs. Their America's dead, and it's time we buried it. The applause was thunderous now. Madison's voice grew bolder with each statement, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "Their values," she scoffed. "Family values, traditional values. These are just code words for resistance to progress. These people built their wealth on privilege and oppression, and now they lecture us about morality." In the third row, Barron Trump's jaw tightened slightly, but his calm demeanor remained unshaken. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he listened intently. Around him, students were nodding enthusiastically, some even shouting words of agreement. "I propose," Madison's voice cut through the noise, "that we start a movement to restrict voting rights and public office positions to those under 50. Let's face it, they had their chance. They messed it up. Now it's our turn." The professor moderating the debate, Dr. Whitaker, stepped forward, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Does anyone wish to present a counter-argument?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the continuing applause. Madison crossed her arms, satisfaction evident on her face. The room began to quiet, students looking around, wondering if anyone would dare challenge such a powerful presentation. "Anyone?" Dr. Whitaker asked again, already reaching for his papers to move on. That's when a deep, clear voice cut through the silence. "I would." The room fell dead silent. All heads turned toward the source of the voice. Madison's smirk widened as Barron Trump rose from his seat. "Well, well," she drawled into the microphone. "Look who decided to grace us with his opinion. Daddy's boy himself." Scattered laughter rippled through the audience, but Barron's composed demeanor didn't waver. As he made his way to the podium, his tall frame and impeccable suit cut a striking figure against the casual atmosphere of the debate hall. Madison stepped aside, making an exaggerated sweeping gesture toward the microphone. "Go ahead, Donald's pet," she sneered. "Defend your boomer buddies. This should be entertaining." Barron adjusted the microphone, his movements unhurried and deliberate. The audience held its breath, many expecting him to falter under Madison's notorious debate tactics. Instead, he smiled slightly, not a smirk, but a genuine, almost sympathetic expression. "Thank you for your passionate presentation, Madison," he began, his voice steady and measured. "But passion without wisdom is like a ship without a rudder, powerful but dangerous." What happened next left the entire room stunned. Barron Trump didn't just respond. He delivered a lesson in wisdom, respect, and true progress that no one saw coming. Stay with us, because this is where the story truly begins. The room was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, charged with anticipation. All eyes were on Barron Trump as he stood at the podium, his tall frame exuding calm confidence. Madison Clarke, still standing to the side, crossed her arms and smirked, clearly expecting an easy victory. Barron adjusted the microphone slightly, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He looked out at the audience, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room, meeting the gazes of students, professors, and guests alike. Then, with a slight smile, he began. "Thank you for your passionate presentation, Madison," he said, his voice steady and measured. "But passion without wisdom is like a ship without a rudder, powerful but dangerous." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Madison's smirk faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered, rolling her eyes in exaggerated disdain. "You speak of progress," Barron continued, his tone calm but firm. "But true progress isn't built by tearing down those who came before us. It's built on their shoulders." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. The audience leaned in, captivated by his measured delivery. "When you say someone over 50 shouldn't have a voice in our future," Barron said, his gaze locking onto Madison, "do you realize you're talking about the very people who created the technology you use to research your arguments? The very people who built the institutions that allow us to stand here and debate today?" Madison opened her mouth to interrupt, but Barron raised a hand, his voice never losing its respectful tone. "Please, you had your turn. I listened carefully to every word." The audience stirred, a few students nodding in approval. Madison's supporters, who had been cheering moments ago, now sat in uneasy silence. "You mentioned smartphones," Barron continued, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Did you know that many of the key innovations in your iPhone were developed by people who are now in their 60s and 70s? The same boomers you want to silence." Madison rolled her eyes again, but the audience was clearly paying attention. Barron's calm, logical approach was cutting through the noise. "Speaking of history," Barron said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "let's talk about your claim that their America is dead. The America they built provides the very platform you're using to attack them. The universities where we study, built by them. The prosperity that allows us to spend our time debating instead of struggling to survive, created by them. The freedom to speak your mind without fear, protected by them. The room was completely still now, the audience hanging on Barron's every word. Even some of Madison's most vocal supporters were nodding thoughtfully. "But they don't understand modern problems," Madison interjected, her voice rising with frustration. "They're out of touch." Barron raised an eyebrow, his expression calm but unyielding. "Really? The generation that lived through the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, multiple economic crises, and the birth of the digital age doesn't understand complex problems. They solved problems we haven't even learned about yet." Madison's face flushed, but she quickly fired back. "But their values—" "Their values?" Barron interrupted, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. "You mean like hard work, personal responsibility, and respect for others? The same values that built the greatest nation on earth?" He gestured to the room, his hand sweeping across the audience. "Look around you. Everything in this room, from the chairs you're sitting on to the democratic system that allows us to have this debate, was built by people who held those values." The crowd murmured again, several students exchanging glances. Madison's supporters were growing noticeably quieter. "But here's what truly concerns me," Barron continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "In the name of progress, you're advocating for the most regressive policy imaginable, discrimination based on age. Isn't it ironic that while claiming to fight for inclusion, you're calling for the exclusion of millions of American citizens?" Madison's composure was visibly cracking. She hadn't expected this level of articulate opposition. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped expression of frustration. "Let me make it even simpler," Barron said, his confidence growing with each word. "Let's look at some of these outdated people you want to silence. Elon Musk, over 50. Bill Gates, over 60. The scientists working on cancer cures, many over 50. The professors who teach us, most over 50. My father, 78. He paused, letting each example land. "Should we dismiss their contributions because of their age?" Madison's voice cracked as she tried to respond. "Oh, how touching," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "The privileged heir lectures us about innovation and hard work." She turned to the audience with a theatrical gesture. "Notice how he conveniently mentions billionaires, the elite 1% that hoard wealth while regular Americans struggle." Several students nodded vigorously, and Madison seemed to regain some of her confidence. But Barron's composed smile never wavered. "Let's examine that claim," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You say they're tools of control, yet these same values taught millions to fight for civil rights, to help their neighbors, to build communities. My trust fund. I've been volunteering at veteran shelters since I was 14. How many hours have you spent helping others, Madison?" The room fell silent. Madison's triumphant expression flickered, and for the first time she seemed unsure of herself. "But that's not—" she started. "Not what you meant," Barron finished smoothly. "It never is it? When facts don't match your narrative, you switch to personal attacks. Classic tactic of someone losing an argument." If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from patriots across America. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next, because Barron Trump is just getting started. Madison's face flushed deep red as she stormed toward the podium, her purple hair wild, her finger jabbing the air. "You think you can come here with your suit and your manners and your privilege, lecturing us about values?" The room crackled with tension. Some students were standing now, feeding off Madison's anger. "You want to talk about helping others?" She practically spat the words. Your family represents everything wrong with this country. The elite, the privileged, hiding behind traditional values while real Americans suffer." She turned to the crowd, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "Look at him, standing there like he belongs here, defending the very system that keeps us down. You know what?" She spun back to Barron, her face contorted with fury. "This freak doesn't deserve to be here." The words echoed through the suddenly silent room. Dr. Whitaker stepped forward, clearly alarmed, but Barron raised a hand. "It's okay, Professor," he said quietly, his composure unshaken. Then, turning to Madison, with an almost sympathetic smile, he said, "You know what's interesting, Madison? When facts fail, you resort to shouting. When logic fails, you turn to insults. When reason fails," he paused, letting the moment hang, "you show everyone exactly who you really are." Madison thought she could outmatch Barron Trump, but what he said next left her, and the entire audience, completely stunned. Stay tuned, because the most powerful moment of the debate is just ahead. The room was electric with tension. Madison Clarke stood at the edge of the stage, her face flushed with anger, her hands clenched into fists. The fiery confidence she had displayed earlier was now replaced by frustration and desperation. Barron Trump, on the other hand, stood tall and composed, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Madison's unraveling. "You think you can come here with your privilege and your polished words and lecture us about values," Madison spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You're just another trust fund baby defending a broken system." The audience stirred, some students murmuring in agreement, but others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Barron's sharp blue eyes remained fixed on Madison, his expression unreadable. He waited a moment, letting the tension in the room build, before speaking. "Madison," he began, his voice steady and measured, "you claim to fight for progress, but what you're really doing is tearing people down. You say you want to build a better future, but all I've heard from you tonight is anger, division, and blame." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the audience. "Let me ask you something. How do you expect to build a better future when you refuse to acknowledge the contributions of those who came before you? How do you expect to unite people when your entire argument is based on tearing them apart?" Madison opened her mouth to respond, but Barron held up a hand, his voice firm but respectful. "Please, let me finish. You had your turn and I listened. Now it's my turn." The audience was completely silent, hanging on Barron's every word. Even Madison's most vocal supporters were now watching him with a mix of curiosity and respect. "You talk about privilege," Barron continued, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. "Let's talk about that. My family has been blessed, yes. But with that blessing comes responsibility. Since I was 14, I've been volunteering at veteran shelters, helping those who sacrificed everything for this country. I've worked with organizations that support single mothers, foster children, and struggling families. What have you done, Madison? How have you used your platform to help others?" Madison's face flushed, and she looked away, unable to meet Barron's gaze. The audience murmured, a few students nodding in agreement. "You see," Barron said, his voice softening, "true privilege isn't about wealth or status. It's about having the opportunity to make a difference and choosing to use it for good. That's what my parents taught me. That's what the older generations you mock have taught all of us." He turned to address the entire room, his voice growing stronger. "You call them dinosaurs, but these are the people who fought for civil rights, who built the technology we use every day, who defended our freedoms in wars most of us can't even imagine. They've made mistakes, yes, but they've also achieved incredible things. And instead of dismissing them, we should be learning from them." The audience erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the auditorium. Madison's supporters looked around, their confidence shaken. Madison herself stood frozen, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "But here's what truly concerns me," Barron continued, his voice taking on a tone of genuine concern. "In the name of progress, you're advocating for exclusion. You want to silence millions of Americans simply because of their age. Isn't that the very thing you claim to fight against? Discrimination, prejudice, intolerance?" He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence in the room was deafening. "Madison," Barron said, his voice almost gentle now, "you claim to champion diversity. But diversity isn't just about race, gender, or age. It's about diversity of thought. It's about respecting different perspectives, even when they challenge your own. That's what makes America great. That's what makes us strong." Madison's shoulders slumped slightly, the fire in her eyes dimming. For the first time, she seemed to be truly listening. "You see," Barron continued, "true progress isn't about silencing voices. It's about learning from them. Every generation thinks they know better than the last, and every generation eventually realizes how much they had to learn. The older generations you mock, they were once young idealists too. They fought for change, just like you. But they also learned that lasting progress comes from building bridges, not burning them." The audience erupted into applause once again, this time louder and more sustained. Even some of Madison's supporters were clapping, their expressions thoughtful. Madison took a step back, her arms dropping to her sides. Her face was pale, her confidence shattered. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Barron turned back to the audience, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. "We don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to respect each other. That's the only way we move forward. That's the only way we build a better future." With that, he stepped back from the podium and returned to his seat, leaving Madison standing alone on the stage. The room was silent for a moment, and then the applause began, slow at first, but quickly building into a thunderous ovation. Madison quietly returned to her seat, her head bowed. The debates continued, but the energy in the room had noticeably shifted. Students who spoke after seemed more measured, more thoughtful in their approaches. The fiery rhetoric that had dominated earlier was replaced by a sense of humility and respect. Nearly an hour later, as Dr. Whitaker was about to close the session, Madison's hand rose tentatively into the air. "Yes, Miss Clarke?" the professor asked, his voice cautious. Madison stood slowly, her steps hesitant as she approached the podium. Gone was the fierce debater who had commanded the stage earlier. This was someone different, someone who had been profoundly changed. "I need to say something," she began, her voice trembling. "Earlier today, I stood here full of arrogance, attacking the very foundations of our society and disrespecting millions of Americans who built everything we have. I was wrong." She paused, taking a shaky breath. The audience watched in stunned silence. "I never imagined that Barron Trump would be the one to show me what true wisdom looks like," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "That someone I was ready to dismiss would teach me about real inclusivity and compassion. I'm sorry. To everyone I offended, to the generations I disrespected. I was blind, and today my eyes were opened." Without waiting for a response, she quickly left the podium and slipped out of the auditorium. The room remained silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Madison's apology was just the beginning. What happened next between her and Barron Trump will restore your faith in the power of understanding and unity. Don't miss the conclusion to this incredible story. The debate hall slowly emptied as students and guests filed out, their conversations hushed and reflective. The fiery energy that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of introspection. Madison Clarke's unexpected apology had left a lasting impression, and many were still processing the events of the evening. Barron Trump remained seated, calmly gathering his notes and belongings. His composed demeanor hadn't wavered throughout the night, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his expression. He had come to the debate prepared to defend the values he held dear, and he had done so with grace and conviction. As he stood to leave, he noticed Madison lingering near the back of the room. Her shoulders were slumped, and she seemed hesitant, as if debating whether to approach him. Finally, summoning her courage, she walked toward him, her steps slow and uncertain. "Barron," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face her, his expression calm and kind. "Yes." "I dot." Madison hesitated, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry. For everything I said, for how I acted." Barron studied her for a moment, his sharp blue eyes searching hers. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. A warm, genuine smile that seemed to put her at ease. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. I respect that." Madison blinked, clearly taken aback by his kindness. "How are you so calm about all of this? I was awful to you. I insulted you, your family, everything you stand for." Barron shrugged slightly, his tone thoughtful. "I've learned that anger doesn't solve anything. My parents taught me that true strength isn't about winning arguments. It's about building understanding. You were passionate, and I respect that. But passion without direction can lead to division. I'm just glad we could have this conversation." Madison looked down, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I thought I knew everything. I thought I was fighting for progress, but I see now that I was just tearing people down. You showed me that there's a better way." Barron placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're all learning, Madison. That's what life is about. The important thing is that you're willing to listen and grow. That's what real progress looks like." For a moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of the evening settling between them. Then Madison spoke again, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "I want to do better," she said. "I want to understand more, to build bridges instead of burning them. Do you think we could talk more about this sometime? I feel like I have so much to learn." Barron nodded, his smile widening. "Of course, I'd be happy to. We may not agree on everything, but that's okay. The important thing is that we're willing to have the conversation." Madison smiled back, a small but genuine smile that hinted at the beginning of a transformation. "Thank you, Barron, for everything." As she turned to leave, Barron watched her go, a sense of hope filling his heart. He knew that change didn't happen overnight, but this was a start. And sometimes that was all it took. The next day, the story of the debate spread quickly across campus and beyond. Videos of Barron's calm, articulate rebuttal went viral, with headlines like, "Barron Trump dismantles age, discrimination argument with grace and wisdom," and "A lesson in respect. Barron Trump's debate victory inspires a generation." Comments flooded social media, with many praising Barron's composure and the values he stood for. Finally, someone who speaks with wisdom and respect. This is the kind of leadership we need in America. Barron Trump is a class act. His parents raised him right. Even those who had initially supported Madison's arguments began to reconsider their stance. The debate had sparked a larger conversation about generational respect, the importance of learning from the past, and the true meaning of progress. A week later, Madison sat in her dorm room, staring at her laptop. The events of the debate had been playing over and over in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to do something more. She opened a blank document and began to type. "Last week, I stood on a stage and delivered a speech that I thought was bold and progressive. I attacked an entire generation, dismissing their contributions and values. I thought I was fighting for change, but I see now that I was wrong. Barron Trump showed me that true progress isn't about tearing people down. It's about building bridges. It's about learning from those who came before us and working together to create a better future. I want to apologize to everyone I disrespected, and I want to thank Barron for teaching me a lesson I'll never forget. We may not agree on everything, but he showed me the power of respect, humility, and understanding. I hope this can be the start of a new conversation, one that brings us together instead of tearing us apart. She hit publish and leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. Within minutes, the post began to gain traction, with comments pouring in from students, professors, and even strangers who had followed the story online. Wow, this is so powerful. Thank you for sharing. It takes a lot of courage to admit when you're wrong. Respect. Barron Trump is an inspiration, and so are you for learning from him. Later that evening, Madison spotted Barron on campus, walking toward the library. She hesitated for a moment, then called out to him. "Barron!" He turned, his expression lighting up when he saw her. "Madison, how are you? I just wanted to say, I wrote something about the debate, about what I learned. I thought you might want to read it." Barron smiled, his eyes filled with genuine warmth. "I'd love to. Send it to me." As they walked together, talking about the future and the lessons they had both learned, it was clear that something had shifted. The debate had started as a clash of ideologies, but it had ended as something far more meaningful, a bridge between two people, and perhaps a bridge for a divided nation. What do you think about this incredible story of transformation and understanding? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more inspiring stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community of patriots. Together, we can celebrate the values that make America great. God bless you, and God bless America.